The theme of this session is writing research on and data management. In this session, our esteemed speaker will be talking on the topic research methodology in international relations. I am Dr. Pratish Vibhakar, Assistant Professor of Sociology at Galgotias University. International relations and world politics are two significant and rapidly changing phenomena. The world is increasingly becoming more and more unified with emergent problems that transcend regional boundaries and parochial national interests. The ongoing pandemic is one example. Such desperate situations of global concerns have not only challenged our traditional way of looking at the global governance system and cross-border relations, but also provided an opportunity to the humankind to examine and
Pratish sir, you are not audible.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, sir. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to session 9 of day 3. The theme of this session is writing research and data management. In this session, our esteemed speaker will be talking on the topic research methodology in international relations. I am Dr. Pratish Vibhakar, Assistant Professor of Sociology at Galgotias University. International relations and world politics are two significant and rapidly changing phenomena. The world is changing, the world is increasingly becoming more and more unified with emergent problems that transcend regional boundaries and parochial national interests. The ongoing pandemic is one such example. Such desperate situations of global concerns have not only challenged our traditional way of looking at the global governance system and cross-border relations, but also provided an opportunity to the humankind to examine and rebuild international relations in a more effective and democratic manner. Therefore, research in the field of international relations have gathered a lot of attraction and interests like never before. In order to accomplish meaningful research in the field of IR, it is important to be aware of new horizons of research methodologies and approaches. Dr. S. Shaji will be delivering the next lecture, who endeavors to equip the young scholars with the knowledge of new approaches in the research methodologies in the domain of IR. To introduce Dr. S. Shaji, who is Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad. Before joining the University of Hyderabad, he was Assistant Professor with the Center for Multidisciplinary Development Research, an ICSSR institute at Dharwad, Karnataka. He was also a consultant to UNICEF and Administrative Staff College, India, Hyderabad. Dr. Shaji was invited as guest professor to the Institute of Political and Social Studies, University of Würzburg, Germany. He was a SUSI Foreign Policy Fellow at Bard College, New York. He has also presented research papers in international seminars and conferences, such as South African Association of Political Studies in Stellenbosch in 2010. Dr. Shaji was Deputy Coordinator at Center for Advanced Studies, Department of Political Science, and Coordinator of Study in India Program, University of Hyderabad. As part of his assignment at Study of India Program, he has been designing and conducting customized courses on contemporary India for participants from universities in the US and Nordic countries since 2012. His research interests in the international relations includes India's relations with developing states, especially from Afro-Asian region, technology transfer, foreign policy of developing states. He is currently part of an international project at the University of Hyderabad on internationalization and virtual exchange, borderless between EU and Asian countries, Erasmus Plus CBHE funded by European Union. Before we begin, I would like to inform our participant here that this session is being recorded and is simultaneously telecasted on Facebook Live and YouTube. This session is of 1 hour, of which last 15 minutes are dedicated to question and answers. If you have any question for the speaker, please use the chat feature of Zoom. You may write down your questions anytime during the lecture. However, we will hold questions until the end of the session, and I will then read questions to Shaji sir as time permits. I will request Professor Shaji if he could provide some references for further reading, as that would be beneficial for our participants. That has been requested for like in our previous sessions too.
Sure.
So I would request that. And without taking any more time, may I please welcome Dr. Shaji to deliver his lecture. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, Dr. Pratish Dibakar, and good morning, uh, everyone who has been participating in this program for last 2 days. And at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Manasi Sinha for inviting me to this prestigious FTP, and and also to the university, Calgotias University, for taking the initiative to hold a workshop on a theme of this great importance. And I was told that there are participants from different disciplines and this different areas, mostly from social sciences. Therefore, I'm going to speak on this specific topic in a way that would be useful to participants from various social sciences. Broadly, I'm going to talk on methodologies in international relations. This is one of the topics which has attracted a lot of attention within social science research in the recent times. And a lot of debates are centering around the shift which is happening within the discipline towards non-Western experiences and understanding the realities of those regions, which in a way is somewhat new, considering the long trajectory that the discipline had in different way. Definitely, IR is relatively a new discipline in comparison with other disciplines like economics, sociology, philosophy, and so on and so forth. Its history is, or its history is limited to perhaps 1 century or something like that. The disciplinary history begins in the last century, the second decade of the last century, 20th century. And to a large extent, the origin of the discipline can be traced to the developments of that particular period, like First World War, for instance. Therefore, the emergence of discipline and its dependence on other established disciplines of that particular time to a large extent shape the methodological trajectories of the discipline. IR being a discipline which emerged out of broadly history and political science settings, began to take methodological root as a reflection of methodological frameworks and approaches that were there in those disciplines. Some of the normative concerns of those disciplines began to shape the philosophical orientation of the discipline for a very long period of time. In a way, IR's existence to a large extent depended on the strength of those established disciplines like political science or history and so on and so forth. Second World War was actually a watershed in the evolution of discipline. To a large extent, the methodological turn away from the initial days began to come up after the Second World War. And to a large extent, such a turn was reflective of the overall methodological debates which were happening at that point in time around behavioralism. So in a way, the behavioral approaches began to dominate IR methodologies in a significant fashion in those times. Attempts were made to connect IR's overall scheme of inquiries on par with the behavioralist ideas, which in turn was informed by natural science practices. If you look at some of the core theoretical debates of that particular time, like realism, for instance, was reflecting on those behavioral practices. The prominent scholars like Morgando, for instance, was trying to project international relations as an area that captures the essence of objective realities of state politics. So in that sense, so-called objective realities were the core of IR methodologies at that point in time. In other words, the researcher and the researched team were considered to be two different kind of entities. In other words, the idea was that there is a world outside or world out there to be understood and explained. So there was a clear-cut gulf between the researchers' positions or the researchers' perspectives and the realities which was there in the system. So what I'm trying to suggest is that many of the IR methodologies of that particular time were trying to project so-called objective, trajectories and objective realities in international relations, and to a large extent, the methods, mostly based on quantitative techniques and methods, began to inform such kind of objective, so-called objective inquiries in the discipline. A wide variety of methods began to come up under the umbrella of behavioralism, positivist schools of thought at that point in time. What we generally see in different theories of IR, like game theory, for instance. And they were trying to interpret the realities, the realities out there as something very objective. And to a large extent, such realities were also shaped by the experiences of certain specific regions. For instance, the European American realities and experiences were informing the core of methodological debates. One of the positive things perhaps came out of the behavioralist adaptation into IR methodologies was the origin of or the development of IR as a distinct social science. So the behavioralism's contribution in that sense was positive in certain ways. IR developed as an independent discipline, and it began to get certain kind of visibility within academia, social science academia, especially in the Western world. And in that sense, it had certain kind of positive contribution. But the issue that often cited as far as behavioralism was concerned is it did not give much importance to ideas and themes beyond state centrality within the discipline, and also the depiction of reality or the analysis of reality in a specific fashion. to a large extent, the experiences outside of the Western world was not taken into consideration in the larger methodological debates. Another issue that we need to, pinpoint when we talk about behavioralism and its engagement with IR is, to a large extent, the debates in IR, though we talk about methodologies, were influenced by the larger debates on theory. Somewhere the debates on theory or theories, overshadowed the debates on methodology. IR's great debates are a reflection of the debates on different theories and the binaries associated with theoretical positions within the discipline. So what I'm trying to suggest is that those obsession with theories and theories, engagement with each other somewhere overshadowed the debates on methodology. But one can also say that the debates on theories contributed indirectly to the debates on methodology. So behavioralism in that sense at that point in time was also contributing to the larger theoretical debates, the traditional theories versus scientific theories. Therefore, there was also discussion around what sort of methodologies and methods that the discipline should pursue in order to understand the world realities. So that was the trend within the discipline for a very long period of time. But in 1970s and 80s, there was actually a shift towards critiquing some of these methodological obsessions of the discipline with behavioralism. Of course, in 1970s, there was huge debate on some aspects pertaining to realism. In a way, a kind of re-emergence of realism in new format like neorealism, which was trying to bring back so-called the objective research in international relations, a kind of obsession with the structure and system of states and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to suggest is that IR for a very long period of time was under the influence of these, traditional and behavioralist theories. And only in 1970s and 80s, there were certain kind of attempts to critique the foundations of IR theories and methodologies. And this is where the critical theories within international relations began to come up, which in turn had a huge impact on the way the methodologies were thought of in the discipline. So a range of theories began to come up in international relations, the critical theories, the neo-Marxian theories, the postmodern theories and many others, in fact, began to question the centrality of these traditional and behavioral theories. When I'm talking about the critiquing of these theories, it does not mean that the traditional theories or so-called classical theories and the methodologies which emanated out of them were completely overlooked. There was a particular kind of a parallel journey, between these traditional theories and critical theories. One of the important points that we have to bear in mind while talking about methodologies is these theories and methodologies were also informed by a huge surge of post-colonial theoretical ideas which emanated out of cultural studies and so on and so forth. So the 80s in that sense was a watershed in the methodological debates of international relations. Critical theories informing the new inquiries in international relations, and especially in the non-Western world. So there was some kind of importance being attached to non-Western realities, non-Western ideas in the frameworks of international relations from 80s onwards. And that is something which had shaped, or which in turn shaped the methodological debates. What I'm trying to suggest is that the post-behavioralist ideas in international relations vis-a-vis methodologies came up in the 80s as a kind of reflection of changing realities of social sciences, and that is something which was setting the tone for new IR methodologies. So one can find multiple layers of methodologies in international relations from 80s onwards. To a large extent, it became rich and trying to reflect, the IR in a new format. In other words, IRs shift towards new issues, which are distinctly different from the state centrality of the discipline was in a way enriching the methodological debates. For instance, issues on gender, race, class, and so on and so forth began to get certain kind of attention within higher academia. Those issues were considered to be outside of IR's overall, scheme of things in vis-a-vis research, and issues were never, figuring in discipline in the past. And this is also part of IR's obsession with the demarcation of its boundaries of themes and issues. Somewhere those issues are considered to be part of the larger domestic, and what is called as international was prioritized and given certain kind of preeminence in the methodological debates. So the point I'm trying to make is the new identities, the new issues, new identities, new regions began to figure in the discourses of discipline. That in turn was actually getting reflected in methodologies. Of course, the word non-Western IR was not fashionable in those times, but definitely it was, the discipline was showing certain kind of interest in capturing the experience of the dominant world, and that is something which had a sort of positive impact on the methodological debates. So as I mentioned earlier, the critical IR that came up in a big way in post-behavioral phase, informing the methodological debates. And this is where we need to look at some of the important methodological trajectories that we see in contemporary period. The ideas, in a way, IR is trying to free from the so-called scientism or its obsession with the science, and it is trying to become more like a critical social science. When I'm talking about IR as a critical social science, I'm trying to highlight some of the new trends which are getting manifested. Of course, the IR in a way has different different kind of versions and different kind of existence, and what you call as mainstream IR, and what sort of ideas sometimes are prioritized and so on and so on. But if you look at the entirety of the discipline, you can see that the critical IR is becoming as part of the core in the contemporary times. So what I'm trying to suggest is that the critical IR is bringing in new methodologies, and the ideas of the non-Western world of different identities are getting reflected. This is where you find enormous importance being attached to new methodological debates around interpretivism, for instance, which looks at the intersubjectivity prism to look at multiple issues that affect people and nation states. In a way, the interpretivism has opened up a wide range of opportunities for IR scholars to look at different problems that confront states and people. Some of the issues which could not be imagined as part of IR research have become the core of IR research today. And if you look at the new themes like, for instance, migration or gender issues and environmental problems, disasters, and many others are becoming part of the new agendas of international relations. Definitely, the post-colonial debates in international relations brought in the essentiality of race and related issues in the discipline. But today, the discipline is actually widening, and methodologies are getting more and more pluralized. Of late, what IR scholars generally talk about as methodological pluralism trends in international relations. Instead of prioritizing on a series of methods, the fashion is to bring in methodological debates from different arenas of the discipline and also from the related disciplines. This is where the IR is depending on the related disciplines in a substantial fashion. For instance, IR taking the essence of research practices from sociology, or from anthropology. There's a huge importance being attached to ethnography and ethnographical research in international relations today. So a lot of techniques connected with ethnography is being taken into IR research practices and all that. This is again a kind of a change in the methodological debates. Or when you talk about methodology, obviously what we are broadly hinting at in simpler terms is kind of philosophical position and justification for the methods that we choose to do research. All right. So it's about a plan for research. So in that sense, the justification or the philosophical orientation of research methods and techniques are becoming much more eclectical and much more flexible in order to incorporate the methods and practices from other disciplines. So this is where one finds ethnography as an important kind of tool in IR research today. And that kind of research is quite useful, especially for the scholars who are looking at issues which are outside of the traditional IR obsessions. For instance, talking about the life of people in conflict zones, or life of people in a borderland context, or from people's perspective, something of that sort. One would use ethnography, and in that particular context, one may use conversation as a kind of personal conversation as a kind of method to gather data, and something of that sort was unimaginable at some point in time. So what I'm trying to suggest is that the new methods are coming, and that actually is a reflection of a larger methodological debates. While I was talking, of course, when one talks about ethnography and its in usages in IR research, one can also look at some of the important techniques being used by ethnography orientations in IR research, like narrative research, for instance. Narrative research has become an important area of or has become one of the important tools of research today to understand multiple kind of issues affecting people in different kind of locations and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to suggest is that the methodological debates in IR have become richer in contemporary times by incorporating the research techniques and methods from different related areas, and that is making the contemporary IR research quite meaningful, quite dynamic. When I'm talking about the changes or the kind of shift which is happening in IR research today, I'm not actually overlooking the traditional methods and techniques, and on top of it, the traditional methodologies in IR. They have their own kind of importance. Somewhere such kind of debates might also be, helping the critical IR research also. For instance, in a way, the state-centric ideas and the inquiries around that is actually enriching the new areas which are coming up as part of the critical IR. So the points that we need to bear in mind when we talk about IR research in contemporary times vis-a-vis the methodological debates are concerned, the discipline itself is changing substantially. There's a perception that IR is becoming more global in terms of its theoretical orientation, in terms of its methodological orientation. Scholars like Amitav Acharya, for instance, has talked about an idea called the global IR. This particular idea reflects the fact that one has to go beyond what is generally called as non-Western IR. The perception in the non-Western regions and spaces vis-a-vis discipline is that the discipline has to have certain kind of orientation towards non-Western settings. But the counter idea is that the non-Western has to be incorporated into the existing the IR orientations and bring in something new, what is broadly called as, or generally called as, global IR. So what I'm trying to suggest is that at one level there is enormous importance being given to theories. At another level, there is importance being given to the overall orientation of the discipline. At another level, there is importance being enormous importance being given to methodological debates in the discipline. To a large extent, these three things are closely connected. Okay, IR is becoming more and more vibrant, and it is on the trajectory to become truly a global kind of discipline, not only in terms of its geographic reach, but also in terms of the methodological and other kind of orientations, the thematic orientations, and so on and so forth. At another level, the discipline is also bringing about a lot of the new trends in the discipline is bringing about a lot of changes in research methods and research techniques. So these are some of the important factors that we need to bear in mind when we talk about methodological debates. So the point I'm trying to make is the IR as a discipline is changing. And second important point is IR's shift or change is also reflecting in methodology. In the process, there are certain kind of outcomes getting manifested. So there is one set of argument within IR methodological debates suggests that there's some kind of decolonization or decolonizing the IR knowledge. Of course, this is an old idea came up through the post-colonial studies and research. But what is happening right now, the decolonizing is happening, and also it is being being informed by the experiences from the non-Western global South region. So this is an important point. So what I'm the most important point that I want to emphasize is that the most important point I need to emphasize, or I would like to emphasize, is that the current path of methodological debates, which encompass a sense of post-positivist, non-Western experiences, are strengthening the discipline and bring in high degree of methodological pluralism by incorporating ideas and techniques from different disciplines, from anthropology, cultural studies, linguistics, literature, and so on and so forth. And this happens in a significant post-positivist fashion, and that in turn is actually enriching the methodological debates in the discipline in an unprecedented fashion. So the methodological pluralism is something which is getting manifested in IR research. At least from a critical IR perspective, that's how one can look at it. Again, another point that I need to highlight when I'm talking about IR methodological pluralism and so on and so forth, there's also a parallel track to international relation. There is enormous emphasis being given to the traditional methods in certain kind of research. So there is in that sense there is plurality. There is real plurality. So the methodological pluralism is something that is getting manifested in IR research in contemporary time. I don't know how long can I take, or should I end here and take questions?
As you wish, sir. We have time. if you want to speak more, like we have some time, like if you
Okay.
want like 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pratish. So the point is about, maybe I should speak a little bit on the new methodological debates in IR in some details. As I mentioned earlier, the new IR debate, the IR methodological debates would give ideas like emphasizing on certain issues and themes outside of the conventional IR obsessions. So, as I mentioned earlier, the identities, um, the diversity of regions are becoming the core concerns in new methodological debates. I talked about ethnography. I also was hinting at how certain kind of ethnographic methods are becoming important. Another important point that has to be connected with this debate is that there is a lot of importance being attached with the qualitative research in international relations today. And qualitative research in a post-positivist manner. In other words, the positivist kind of the qualitative research that was practiced during the behavioralist times has become, somewhat questionable. So in those kind of research, there is a disconnect between the researcher and the research. So what is happening right now is much more eclectical, much more dynamic kind of linkage between the researcher and the research. In other words, research has become an important kind of intellectual endeavor where the researchers standing also is taken into consideration, or in other words, the gulf between the researcher and the research is getting blurred, and in that context, the new forms of qualitative research is quite significant. One conducts different kinds of methods, or one employs different kinds of methods and techniques to undertake qualitative research in a post-positivist fashion, narrative techniques, and based on in order to operationalize that, one brings in personal conversations, interviews in a different format, and the different kinds of participatory observations, and so on and so forth. Now, this kind of orientation in qualitative research in a post-positivist fashion in IR is somewhat different in the sense that the conventional IR research prioritize certain kind of sources as the most significant ones. For instance, the government data, or the documents from different official agencies, and certain kind of archival materials, and so on and so forth. Today, of course, those sources are equally important. It is not that those sources have become redundant, but along with that, one takes into consideration different kinds of sources, different kinds of information, different kinds of inputs, which are actually, strengthening the IR research. For instance, if somebody some IR scholar works on sex trafficking. One has to look at different kinds of sources. It is not that one has to depend only on government sources or official data. One might talk to people to get the experience of people, their personal views on people who are perhaps victims or who are part of a larger, the problem. So this is where the critical IR would be looking at different kinds of qualitative techniques and methods. And this is where the new methodological debates are becoming significant. IR at one level tries to give importance to the state centrality in research, especially in the conventional form of IR research. At another level, IR also takes into consideration different kind of issues which were hitherto neglected. And in order to understand those neglected issues, one has to bring in new methods and techniques, and in the process we are actually bringing in new methodological orientations. And this is an important point. Perhaps students of and we are all students of social sciences in general. I talked a little bit from the standpoint of international relations, since we are all broadly part of social science research. I thought some of these debates would be giving ideas as to how a relatively new discipline like international relations is moving in the contemporary period, and how dynamically disciplines like IR are incorporating the new methodological orientations into its structure, and in the process getting richer and richer. I'll stop it here, and I will definitely take some questions from audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shaji, for your insightful lecture on the emerging trends and approaches in the field of IR. Some of the you talked about, you rightly talked about like how IR has moved from traditional theories, and how it has incorporated the new trends and approaches, and new themes have been introduced in IR, and that has also reflected in the research methodology of IR itself. Thank you very much for that insightful lecture. We definitely have some questions. I would one by one read it out to you, and please. Okay, just I'll read it out, sir.
Yeah.
Give me a moment. Okay, the first question is, could you just throw some light on postmodernist methodology in IR?
Okay.
This is from Srinivas Junuguru.
Yeah, the point is the postmodernist methodologies in IR question the epistemological practices of conventional IR. For instance, the postmodernist orientation within IR questions the nexus between the knowledge produced and the producer of the knowledge. In other words, there is a power relation. So what is stated as, or what is projected as knowledge is actually a problematic terrain. So postmodernism tries to critique the linkage between the knowledge and the researcher. I'm taking more into this particular question into a methodological debates. So this is where the particular, for instance, when you talk about ideas like anarchy, for instance, in international relations, or ideas like sovereignty, for instance, and these are like very basic things, but those ideas, the way they are represented in the mainstream IR theoretical frameworks like realism, for instance, or liberalism, for instance, are a reflection of a particular kind of power relations. So the postmodernist literature, postmodernist methodologies would bring in critical perspective of how power relations are built between some of the key concepts which are being used in IR. They are not merely, a given terminologies, or they are not something which are outside of, certain kind of power relations. So when you talk about, say, ideas like anarchy, often in a realist discourse, it is stated that anarchy is a given situation. When you study the classical scholarship like Morgenthau, E.H. Carr, and all, and that's what we get. But today, there's a much more, clear, nuanced perspective that those ideas are not given; they are being constructed. Of course, constructivist school tries to, give that kind of idea, but postmodernism, parallelly is also trying to question some of these knowledge building practices within IR academia. This is kind of simpler explanation, perhaps. Yeah.
I'm interrupting here. I'm so sorry.
No
I just want to thank you first,
yes.
Shaji sir, for joining us.
Yes.
And I have a question here. So I would like to read it out. For a researcher from the South, engaging in research in non-traditional aspects of international relations, for an example, migration, generations that we have spoken about, it requires the researcher to maybe have a field study and interaction with the native community and policymakers in the West, if they are picking up certain issues from there. So how do you suggest if work to basically carry out an effective research there? Because sometimes it is difficult for a researcher from the South to immediately engage with the community there. So what is the feasible way to basically carry out research over there? If you can put a light on that.
Yeah, I think that's a valid question. It's quite pertinent. Like how a scholar from the global South conducts research in the in a context outside of her own region, and I think that's a question that we were trying to ask. The point is, yes, those are difficult, especially like I'm sure your question perhaps comes out of your own experience as a scholar of European studies. I mean,
yes, true.
To go to,
I'm sorry to just
field work in places like
I had
Germany
faced that problem. With
it's always a
research as
problem.
well.
Of course, definitely, when you look into the social dimensions of, of international relations in different regions outside of one's own, is always a problem. But then perhaps one has to use certain kind of general protocols of research, and that is being accepted. But my point on global South or non-Western IR orientation was broadly linked with how the current methodological debates in the discipline are incorporating experiences from the non-Western regions, the scholars, non-Western scholars from non-Western experiences, or the global IR looking at the non-Western experience in what fashion they are doing. But as you rightly pointed out, it's more like a technique and method problem. Like when you, of course, it can be also a methodological problem, like when one wants to do research in a different context, what should we do? I think there are certain kind of, accepted protocols within the discipline for cross-cultural, research projects. that has to be, and that is where many things might be important. Communication might be an important area that has to be given a lot of importance on that kind. And perhaps understanding or getting the first-hand information about, especially sociological and historical information about a specific research location is really, really significant. So a lot of people talk about the essentiality of language as an important tool to conduct research in those contexts. For instance, a person wants to do research on German political system, might be better placed if she knows German language, right? So I think those protocols have become more or less commonsensical in the contemporary context, and one looks into the essentiality of the language as a major kind of tool to. But the problem that often we find in the discipline is that the experiences of the non-Western are not taken into consideration while building theories. This is where the criticism of IR comes. I mean, research methods and techniques are definitely important issues, but beyond that, or more than that, there is also a problem with the theory building or methodological debates, because they do not give much importance to the experiences from the non-Western world. So that is something problematic. That is one area, an issue that's being addressed right now. Dr. Nancy's question is quite pertinent. It is also important that we need to understand how one can conduct research in a different socio-cultural settings. We talk about a non-Western scholar working on a Western setting is but there are some kind of protocols and tools available to conduct research to a large extent. Yeah.
So thank you for answering that. Anand, since we are short of time, and we will be taking only 2 questions, and there are so many questions, it is flooded already. So I'll take 2 questions, and rest of the questions I'll send you through email. I would request you to kindly respond to them and at your own convenience, sir.
Sure.
And we will forward it to our audience. I'll take this question. There is this Rachna is asking, and I quote, how the positionality of researcher can be qualified as a grounded research rather than a personal generalization of post-colonial experiences.
Yeah.
As social anthropologist, I think to qualify personal observation and experiences require various lenses. Should I read it once again, or?
Broadly, I understood the question, like how the personal experiences of the researcher can be given a primacy over, the other concerns. Yes, that of course is an important issue, but at the same time, today one of the important theories or methods that is being used to understand socioeconomic or sociocultural or social research in general is grounded theory. Okay? One can build certain kind of theoretical assumptions based on data. One goes to the field with certain kind of openness and collect the data and try to build theory. The grounded theory debates, is something which is connected with these kind of issues. Yes, it's not that personal experiences would be generalized into a grand theory building when one brings in elements of subjectivity into research. there are certain kind of methods and protocols to, undertake such kind of research. It is not that the personal experiences would be always getting upper hand when it comes to theory building. But one thing we need to bear in mind is most of these critical methodological perspectives do not give much importance to the idea called objectivity. And objectivity is not something which is objectivity in a very positivist sense. It is not that there cannot be a situation where one can't agree. There is, or people can't agree on certain things. There is agreement on several things. There are certain kind of strong consensus on knowledge in certain areas. But the way we used to project objectivity by looking at, say, game theory or some of those, important positivist ideas are not given much importance in a certain kind of critical IR research. Therefore, how to build the theory, how to draw inferences out of personal experiences of a research with a problem research is done through certain kind of systematic ways. There are, for instance, when you do narrative research, for instance, there are clear-cut protocols on how to do narrative research, how to represent data, how to collect data, how to interpret data, how to draw inference out of the data that we have collected, and how certain kind of data has to be, seen critically, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to suggest is that while talking about the personal dimensions or subjective dimensions in social science research, I'm not actually trying to suggest that the entire personal prejudices or ideas would be reflected as research. There are certain kind of protocols and ways of looking at problems, and in the process, even the personal biases also will be taken into consideration. So in that sense, it's a dynamic process. It's not something related to somebody talking about some issues in a random fashion. There are clear-cut protocols and ways of doing research, though the subjective elements are taken into consideration. What you call as intersubjectivity and so on and so forth is actually one of the lenses through which many of these social issues are being examined. Yeah.
So, thank you. There is another question by Dipti Kashyap.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Can we bridge the methodological approach in IR and geopolitics?
Yeah. See, the geopolitics is again one of the areas where there is a lot of methodological contestations, right? And how geopolitics can be seen and understood. Even when we take, the existing geopolitical theories, there is a huge variation in terms of understanding what actually constitute geopolitical dynamics. The classical theories to critical geopolitics, classical geopolitics to critical geopolitics to feminist geopolitics. And there's a wide range of theoretical debates on geopolitics. Now, the unity among different methodologies is actually a problematic terrain, but to a large extent, one can, of course, use certain kind of eclectical approach to understand geopolitics, but at the same time, the analysis and interpretation can be done from a specific, methodological position also. A lot of people work on geopolitics from the standpoint of, say, a heartland theory or sea power theory and things like that. And somebody would be looking at geopolitics from a feminist geopolitics position, where the whole, the whole foundation of knowledge building in geopolitics is critiqued and questioned. So there is a huge diversity in terms of understanding, these kind of research issues. This is where I was referring to an idea called methodological pluralism.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have one question from I have my question one. We have been, I'm not a student of IR, and although I have here read an article here and there, I had always we have been reading in newspapers and everywhere at so many places the national interest, quote unquote. But there is some and it was talked always as if there was a singularity to national interest.
Yes.
I would like you to I would like you to comment on whether there is any singularity to national interest. Is there any singular national interest that exists, and or whether that is so dynamic and simultaneously what is and if it is not singular, then why do we talk as if it was a static and singular?
The question on singularity on a concept in IR, I think that is something problematic. As I mentioned earlier, it depends on what sort of theoretical lens that one would employ. There are certain kind of ideas about national interest, sovereignty, anarchy, and so on and so forth. They are considered to be, sacrosanct concepts in mainstream IR. So, especially from the standpoint of the mainstream theories like realism and so on and so forth. So they take into consideration certain kind of ideas as important in the context of a specific state. And that particular idea may be having certain kind of historical context, maybe having its own kind of contemporary context. And based on that, they would come to certain kind of consensus and work around it. But if a scholar looks at those problems from a different perspective, there may be different kind of priorities on that kind of research. One might have a critical perspective, perhaps. One might actually take into consideration the plurality of views on some of those issues. This is one of the reasons why one should look at the positionality of the scholar, and that is really important. Otherwise, the analysis would not make much sense. For instance, a feminist IR scholar would be looking at different kind of issues and themes, and would be looking at issues like national interest in a different way. Perhaps the national interest would be seen from a gender perspective. A post-colonial theorist would be looking through the prism of race. So what actually constitute the analytical lens that would in turn inform the research orientations. But generally, when many of the research that we see as part of our foreign policy or geopolitics are done from the perspective of of realism, of different shades. That's one of the reasons why we tend to focus on a few things as kind of, what you call set notions.
There is one more question I would read that. This is from Professor Anil P. Joshi, and he is asking, what are the impact as of gender, race, and ethnicity on international relations?
Yeah, good question. In fact, there's enormous importance being given to race, gender, and the other point that was mentioned. The idea is there are enormous space for different types of research in higher academia today. Definitely, the race as an important theoretical lens was introduced in the discipline long time ago. Post-colonial studies, post-colonial research, in fact, brought in interesting, refreshing points on race. That partially came out of, the writings of scholars from Africa and also from American context and so on and so forth. Some of those research came primarily in cultural studies, literature, so on and so forth, which later on was incorporated into IR. Now, a lot of scholarship is happening within the discipline on race and IR. And some of those debates are again connected with larger questions on history and IR, colonialism and IR, and stuffs like that, the points like that. So what I'm trying to suggest is that there's a kind of effort on the part of IR scholars to focus on issues like IR, on race. And another important point is gender. There's enormous importance being given to gender studies in international relations, and not only from the Western perspective, but also from non-Western experiences. And different shades of feminist debates are actually informing IR research. Non-Western experiences are taken into consideration. Different types of identities identities vis-a-vis gender are taken into consideration. This is where people talk about intersectionality. So the intersectionality research is an important feature of research, especially the ones pertaining to gender. Another point that I want to emphasize is the non-traditional security studies is also contributing to the richness of the discipline. This is where the methodological debates in the field are getting more and more vibrant. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, it's on environment, it's on disaster, it's on health studies, migration. So the boundaries of discipline is getting widened, and new themes are getting incorporated into new regions and their experiences are being given importance, and new identities are given, or identities are given certain kind of importance which were hitherto neglected. So all these processes are contributing to the enrichment of methodological debates in the field.
Thank you, Professor S. Shaji.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your insightful opinion on IR, new trends in IR. I'm sure that it is going to help our new emerging scholars, young scholars, and they would incorporate these new approaches in their studies and research further. Thank you very much for your valuable time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I thank Dr. Manasi Sinha once again for inviting me to this prestigious
It
program.
was really insightful session and informative
Thank
session.
you.
We have more questions,
Probably I'll
actually.
answer to
So-
participants through email.
Yes, but due to paucity of time, we are not able to
I do
accommodate all
understand.
questions, but we'll send it to you across the, please,
Sure.
also please send us a
Some
list of
study,
reference
some
students
reading
are,
materials.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Sure,
Thank you
I'll
so
do
much.
that.
I'll get back
I'll
to
do
you.
that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. With this, I would call this session an end. And participants, may I request, it was the tea break was supposed to be at 11:30, but since it is already 11:45, let us meet at 12. So from
Sir, we are continuing the session.
Acha, are we?
We will meet after the session.